Who knew that in 2018, when I met Francis Conrad and his wife, Kathie, that they would make such an impact in my life? Francis and I spoke almost every month or every couple of months at least. We talked about life. We talked about living. We talked about travel. He coached me. I coached him. We had an opportunity to really connect in a deep way. He supported me in seeing that connection was much deeper than just contact with others. And to this day, he still contributes. A month after the podcast that you're going to listen to and watch, Francis passed away. And I just want to dedicate this episode to him and how much he not only continued to contribute to me, but to so many other people. Love and care for him. This is for you, Francis. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Not Quite Strangers. My name is Valerie Hope. I am a leadership coach as well as a speaker, and I host this program. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to bring two people who do not know each other and have a meaningful conversation. I just am so committed to a few things. One of them is inspiring curiosity with conversations like this, building connection between people, and more than anything, disrupt how people interact with strangers. And this is an example of how you might disrupt how you interact with people. So I brought two fascinating individuals to the screen today. And I would love, as you're listening to our conversation, if you have questions of your own, or if you're finding that some of this is relevant to you or touches you, take some notes. Maybe this will enhance the conversations you have with other people in your life, or you might make a comment in social media, or perhaps in the video chat, and let us know what you thought or what came up for you. Now, to introduce my guests, I want to start with introducing Francis. So Francis, you are like the epitome of having met a stranger and having meaningful conversation. Because Francis and I met 2018, I believe, and we were both at a conference and happened to be sitting next to each other. There were hundreds of people at this conference. Francis and his wife sat next to me. Actually, it was you, Francis, and then your wife next to you. And as we were talking, we were doing some exercises or something, and we just started talking. And out of that, I don't know, hour-long interaction, ended up exchanging business cards. And ever since then, you and I have probably met and talked once a month for years now, just to connect. Francis helps my thinking brain and my spiritual development. So it's been fantastic. And Francis, feel free to unmute there. And I'm going to now introduce your partner here, Guilherme. Guilherme, you and I also have an interesting story of strangers meeting, because we were introduced via LinkedIn by someone that we both know, that a gentleman, oh my gosh, Francisco? No, who introduced me to you?
Luciano,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Luciano, yes, Luciano. Luciano and I used to work at Hyatt together, and somehow he thought, oh, you know what, Valerie, you should meet Guilherme, and vice versa. So he sent a message to me saying, you should meet this guy, have a conversation. And you and I did. It's probably been 2 years, a year now or so.
I think around a year, yeah.
About a year.
Or maybe a little bit more, yeah. I think around a year. Yeah, it was 1 year, because I was in this place where I am now. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah. And it's just fascinating, because after that we connected and we kept chatting, and every once in a while we'll send each other a WhatsApp message and connect then. So I'm so excited, because the reason I brought the two of you together, as I was expanding this circle, is Francis and you, Guilherme, are both so committed to expanding people's worlds through travel and expanding your own. Yes. And as I was hearing the two of you share in our conversations about your passion for that, for travel, and what you've learned and what you've experienced, but also what experiences you want to give to others, I thought, oh, this might be a fascinating conversation to have between the three of us, because I'm also very committed to that. So first of all, welcome to the show. Yay.
Thank you, Valerie.
My pleasure. Why did you say yes to coming on the show and meeting a stranger?
Francis.
Oh, that's for me?
For both of you.
Well, why did I say yes?
Yeah.
I thought of that right before. And the simple answer is because, Valerie, you asked if I'd like to do it. And I figured that I would do it just totally on your invitation.
Cool. I should invite you to do more things. Thank you, Francis. Anything else about that?
No, I think that covers
That
it.
covers it. Guilherme, what about for
You
you?
wouldn't let me know anything about this guy, so I thought, what else would I'd have to wait.
Same. Yes, I think my answer is very similar. It's surely because my experience with Valerie, with you, such nice talks, and so I trust very much your invitation, your ideas, and your work and your projects. So I said, wow, that's surely going to be very interesting. Another opportunity to talk to you. Surely you think about something interesting about the combination of the people, your friends who you're putting together. So I was very curious, and as we could not research whom we're gonna talk to, I was very curious.
So let's talk about that for a second, because this is interesting. Two things that came up for me is I hear this often, that people just trust me, right? And so they say yes because there's some trust. I imagine this happens with other strangers. Other people say, hey, I think there's somebody you should meet. I'm not the only person that does it. But what is it about trusting in this occasion that made a difference for you? Like, what was it about our relationship or our conversations that had you say, yeah, I'll take a risk and do this and meet someone on a podcast?
The adventure. I've never, been part of anything set up this way. And I sort of like doing things, especially when they're new for the first time. So it's like, yeah, this is new. Let's go for it.
That's interesting. That's an interesting connection, I think, among us, because for me the word would be like a combination of openness. Like it's always nice to be open to new experience, and which I think has so much to do with traveling, as we all here like very much, and also trusting because the subjects we've talked and the way you approach different subjects, I said, oh, that's surely going to be interesting. There is no other option. So I think it's trust in those directions, which seems so much related to the subject in common that we have here. Maybe subjects like traveling and learning different important things about life.
So it sounds like there's two pieces to the trust. One, you trusted me because of your previous experience with me, but then you also trust yourself to be interested and open to an adventure, right? To be open to maybe a new idea or some new activity. What did come up for you? As both of you have mentioned, we couldn't research the other person. So what was it about meeting a stranger that came to mind? What questions were running in your mind about this?
I think where it started for me was not questions about meeting a stranger. Where it started is, why won't she let us talk to each other ahead of time? So I felt like I wanted to rebel against that. Then we talked about it, and I promised I wouldn't. But I thought of, going around your back and making a phone call just for the sake of, I guess, rebelling. We pushed that button. All I did was, she said, you can't talk to him ahead of time. And it's like, oh, yeah?
Okay, let's tell her, Francis, everything we have talked before.
Oh,
that was a long conversation we had.
Okay, Valerie, we must tell you. Must be no joke.
there's
Exactly.
no law against it. I'm happy to let you guys introduce yourself, but then that would go against the point of meeting live for the first time. That's all. But both of you with equal curiosity said to me, what can I know anything? Can I reach out to this person? Can I research? More so than actually other strangers that I've interviewed on the podcast. So I was really curious about that reaction.
Interesting.
So for Francis, it was like rebellion. And Guilherme, what was it for you?
Well, I think there is the curiosity. Yeah, so nice. We're gonna have a talk, and then I came. No, but wait. All the idea of this meeting is maybe not knowing each other. So maybe better let me ask Valerie first. But at the same time, I think in other contexts, it's respectful. Yeah, if we know about the other person before we meet and talk. So in other contexts, yeah. So I think it's all came all together. But again, if you thought about the idea of putting strangers together to talk, there's surely good reasons for that, and happy with the experience that
You're being very easy.
offered.
Why do you say that, Francis?
My rebel button is still pushed.
Well, I mean, is it ever so? Okay, what context would it be preferable to know something in advance? Like let's just go underneath the surface a little bit. What is it that would make knowing about the two of you before having this conversation? What difference would it have made for the two of you?
Probably for me, very little. The biggest part would be just, it's like, what's the general area that we might have in common or that we're here to explore? But beyond that, I think, if I look at my way of conversing and meeting people, it has very little to do with what I might hear ahead of time.
Say more about that.
Nice.
Well, it's like I felt rebellious and all of a sudden it starts coming out. I didn't think of that ahead of time. It was just a way to sort of feel like, yeah, that'll be fun to do. Let's see where it goes, what happens.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think?
I think like both options are totally fine. So nice possibilities. The option of knowing a little bit more before would be the possibility of, and you can think about if that's right or not, because we can maybe use the time better. Like, okay, if I already know this about Francis, maybe when we talk, I can go further from that information that I already got to know about Francis. That's one possibility. But in the other hand, this freshness, this contact and talk, also really interesting, different way to know each other. And yeah, so that's what, when you ask it in other contexts, why we would rather know the person first, I think, yeah, maybe a good way to use our time. By the time we meet each other, we know already some things, and in the meantime, maybe reflections, questions will come from what we heard. But yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily the only better way to do it. Yeah, like it's so nice to get to know and see how it goes as well. Nice.
Well, I think there's truth to all of it. Like one, the idea of being told not to find out about somebody could, inspire an itch to, I want to do this. But then also to your point, Guilherme, maybe having a more specific, more targeted conversation if you already know some of the blanket stuff, the general things from the beginning. But, and this is why one of the reasons I brought the two of you guys together is, travel is such an important part of your lives. I imagine you've been strangers in a lot of places for a lot of people in the travel. I know in my case, when I was working with the organization Up With People, I lived with like 400 host families at the 5-year mark in this organization. And I remember we would only stay in different locations for maybe a couple of days in some cases. And how do we make the most out of that time? So I have, I could have like a master's degree in meeting strangers just from that experience, because we would literally be picked up. We didn't even know who the family was in advance. We have their name and they'd have our name written on a piece of paper. And they would say, Valerie, you're going with this family. And oh, the Smiths. Okay, nice to meet you. And we literally would meet and then go spend the night at their home and eat at their table and do activities with them. And I remember, because we only had a very limited amount of time, that we needed to go deep fast in order for it to be a really fulfilling experience. You know, after you stay with a few families asking, oh, what do you do? Where do you work? Where do you go to school? It's really old. And so that's been my experience as a stranger meeting other strangers. So I'm curious, with the two of you, as your travel experience, what's that been like?
You know, I'm going to preface it and then I'll tie it together.
Sure.
But the preference is that I worked for 35 years as a therapist. And as a therapist, I think what I like most about that job is that I might work with the same person for an extended period of time, which could be up to a year or something. But somehow or other, I always felt that when I was going to meet the person on that day, I didn't have the slightest idea of where they were at or what was going on. There was no way I could prepare. And I enjoyed being able to approach people like as if I'd never, met them. I had to figure out each time I met them what's going on, or a way to connect that would be unique to that day. And I think I carried that over into travel. That to me, obviously when you travel, you're running into people all the time. And it's the same goal. It's like, okay, I don't know this person. I have no idea where they're at today, but in what way can I engage them that seems appropriate to this person? Because if it was somebody else, what's appropriate is going to be totally different. Mm-hmm. I think today there's something about you, but it must also be coming from Guilherme, that I like being rebellious with the two of you. And I didn't have any idea ahead of time that that might be one of the things that I would show up as. So anyways, I guess travel to me is an opportunity to meet strangers, just like I did as a therapist.
Something you said I really loved, Francis, and you didn't quite say it in these words, but the idea of meeting someone that you know you will meet, but meet them as a stranger every time. Yeah. Because we do, depending on what you ate, how well you slept, your mood, your time in life, even if we meet on a regular basis, we're meeting a different facet of that person. And it sounds like for you, having kind of like a beginner's mind about each moment that you meet this person really probably helps you go deep, or at least be more objective about what they're dealing with.
And it's more about how can I enter the conversation in a way that's going to help them to respond.
Wow.
So it's more about my entry at first than it is about trying to figure out who they are or what's going on with them. And a lot of that is intuitive.
How we enter a conversation. Guilherme, what would you say to that?
If it's okay, just go back a little bit and come back to it.
Absolutely.
Because one thing that came to my mind when we were talking about the difference of knowing about a person first, or just getting to know before knowing anything else. It's interesting. I found it interesting to think about a place when we travel. We can go to a place where we don't research anything on it, which I think is so nice. And I cannot say which one is better. I think both are so nice experience. And the other option is we research well, because then we are ready to whatever else come. We go further some steps, and then we don't have to use our time with those. We can see other things coming. You're more ready to see other levels of the experience there, of the information there. And what was something else about that? Yes, and then one thing that maybe we all share, and I see in my work so often, my own experience and experience of friends who I help to travel, is that, and I always share that with them. My view is that the most interesting parts of a travel experience is not what we planned, what we knew that was going to happen, or those small things that just happen, like that we could not plan those things. Those are the most meaningful and touching and things that will not forget. And then think about your question on what about this, when we are traveling, always meeting new people, and and then those questions that we make in the beginning, after some time we I must be honest, I got tired of those same questions, like, oh, where are you coming from? For how long have you been traveling? Where have you been traveling? Ooh la la. After, I kind of try to escape, when I see that these questions will come, I just try to ooh la la, go around. And then I think the way that I found, and I think it's so much different. There are so many different ways. Like I try to be quiet. I don't go very much towards meeting people. I like to observe and see how things go, and then let things happen by themselves. And then this connection will come. And then I think it's interesting to see how, I don't know. I think has to do with this openness that Francis was sharing, on his therapy experience, and I think that's a nice way to see how things develop by themselves, and how the quality of the relationship and conversation will grow, will unfold or develop, depends how we see.
So you hit on something I'd love to ask you now. That's, when you talk about seeing how things develop on their own, do you ever suspect that there's a larger reality that's orchestrating this whole thing? Are you entering a foreign culture, and then this larger reality is setting you up to run into certain people, certain experiences? It feels like, wow, look at, we met each other. It almost can't be explained, but it couldn't have been a better meeting. Well, maybe there's, like something up above us in a deeper reality that's orchestrating the whole thing. And our job is just to be able to fall into what wants to happen. You ever think that way?
Valerie or
you?
Yeah, but you too, please.
I have some thoughts, but
Well,
yeah, you go
nice.
first.
Please. All right.
It's all your fault.
Yeah.
You brought it up, so let's go for it.
Okay. Well, the first thing that came to my mind is, yes, totally. Like I work in India mainly, India, Nepal, and India is known to be a chaos. We say that in English? Chaos. Yeah.
Chaotic.
Chaos.
Yeah.
And which I find is a really nice, again, English, orchestra, like a well-organized chaos for me. It's really clear, and one of the ways to see it's like I have a very spreadsheet mind, like engineering,
organized.
kind of engineering, very spreadsheet mind, but there's no way out. It's like it's so clear how if you let things happen, they happen in a way that it's unbelievable. There's no better way to let things happen. Let's say in my work there, for sure, in the programs, and then things happen, like you meet people. Like one of the other things that came to my mind listening to you, Francis, your point, that there are people that how can we meet, like it's, even we talk between us, it's like no effort, we just meet. It's amazing. We don't have to arrange the meeting. It's just like, it's amazing. It's really.
Or sometimes it can feel like an attraction. Like I have to talk to that person, or I have to turn down this street. And I'd say, why do you need to turn down the street? And it's like, I don't know, but I gotta. So sometimes it's just like an attraction. There's something that's pulling us or pushing us. I've been in situations where I walked in the door and it was like, oops, I'm in the wrong place. I better get out of here right away.
Like what? Tell us the story.
Like one was, years ago, I was in Italy and I walked into this room and the government had fallen apart. So there was all these people with weapons and they basically were talking against the United States at the time. And I thought, I shouldn't be in here. But before I knew that they were talking about the United States and I focused on the guns, even before that, as soon as I walked in, I just knew you shouldn't be here. I just knew it.
Like an emotion, a sensation? What
Like
did you notice?
Emotion. Yeah, you shouldn't be here. And then I saw those other things and I thought, yeah, it's probably a good idea. Get out of here before they do something. But that's happened many times where I've been in situations and I was going the wrong way. And I was like, I had the idea, don't go there, go this way. When you get lost, make the wrong turn. Sometimes you don't have to get further lost. You just go, no, doesn't feel right. Let's try that way.
That is an interesting point.
I think that not only are we directed in terms of that there's something that wants us to experience certain things, but there's a relationship that I'm building with the universe. So it's not just about my feet walking down the streets and interacting and traveling, but at the same time, I call it a vertical dimension. So there's horizontal travel, which is walking around and doing the things I do. And then there's vertical travel, which is what goes on inside of me as I'm doing all this. And part of that is developing a stronger connection to whatever this invisible reality is. That's just my experience. And it may not be true at all. I just like it.
That resonates. It resonates. A few of the things that you said resonate for me. I think primarily when I think about travel, especially, I remember, and this is going back to something you said too, Guilherme, that I took a trip. It was like my Eat, Pray, Love trip. You know, that book that came out years ago. It was my Eat, Pray, Love trip. It was after I got divorced, maybe about a year after. And I feel I needed something to just do for myself that would feel good. And so I booked a trip to Italy for 10 days alone. And I knew nobody. So I wasn't planning to meet anyone there or anything. And I knew I wanted to go to Rome. So there was the sightseeing I wanted to do there. And I also heard a lot of people went to like Florence or Milan. And I thought, yeah, I want to go someplace that I don't hear that much about. So I went to Naples instead. And I did no research. Other than make sure I have my passport and my plane ticket, and well, the passport, that's a whole story in and of itself. But I wanted to, and I had a place to stay. I stayed at this is before Airbnb.com existed, but I actually stayed at a bed and breakfast because I also knew I wanted the experience of living in the city rather than in a hotel with other tourists. But I was attracted to the trip for a couple of reasons. One is because I always heard and felt that Italy, and I'd never been before, but Italy was a really feel-good city, a feel-good country for women, especially. You know, Italian men tend to be very generous. And it's true. And it was so fun. And then the second piece is this idea of having a sense of groundedness and history and adventure, which I also heard a lot about in Italy with the food and the language. And so I had to learn a little bit of Italian, and I would find restaurants to eat, you know, just on my own as I was walking. just because I walked and I saw, this looks interesting. I want to see who the people are. Oh, do you have a dog wanting to say hi, Guilherme?
I just mute here for a second.
That's okay. So that was really fascinating. And then also the people I got a chance to interact with, oftentimes that I would have never planned to do so. But, you know, Francis, to your point about being attracted into a certain spot or place, or to have a conversation with someone, parla inglese. And then from there, I had no idea what was going to happen, but it was always good. I left that trip really being restored and fulfilled. And so much of my travel has done that for me. So I'm going to see any questions or responses to that. But I do have
I do have a question for you two, please. Some fireworks here. That's why the dogs are.
No.
I like
and
this.
We should say you're in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in case.
Yeah,
I'm near Sao Paulo. It's a small district called Souzas near Sao Paulo. Where are you, Francis?
I'm in Arizona, USA.
Oh, nice. Oh, nice. Okay. I was connecting 2 points that we were talking here that Francis shared, like this beginner mind, as Valerie brought from the experience of Francis in the therapy, and then this seeing the things happening by themselves. Yeah, the combination of this. So my question is, why do you think we like to enjoy traveling? Because in one hand, we like to know things, yeah. But in the other hand, I think we're trying to get vacation from our knowing, our daily, the things that we already know, or daily routine. And so how, well, let me go forward a little bit. Do you think that part of the experience of traveling that we enjoy very much is this same experience of the beginner mind, of the presence in the therapy, that's where we feel fresh, that's where we feel present and good, and then we kind of learn how to do it, we get vacation of our knowing, which yeah.
Francis?
Boy, I could answer that in 2 ways.
Great.
The first one is sort of responding to what is it that gets me or gets anyone to want to travel. And in my case, I was the second oldest in a family with 14 siblings. And I think growing up and being almost the oldest, I was in the role of being my parents' helper, which meant that everything that I did seemed to have more to do with helping my mother, taking care of my siblings. And there was very little for me. And so I felt like there was not enough to go around. And I think at some point I decided I need to get out of here. I need to get as far away as possible so I can have something that's mine. So I think I was driven to travel because I felt like if I stayed at home, I would never be able to have my own life. So that was very early. I was in grade school. But then the other side of it is, I'm going to jump the story ahead a little bit. Valerie knows my story better. But I was really overcome with fear when I ended up on the first trip by myself in Istanbul. And it was, back in like 1982 or something like that. And so it was a very scary experience for me. In fact, I thought, why on earth did I do this? This was the stupidest thing. Everything just really made me feel like as if I made a mistake, but it was too late because I already had, 2 weeks to go or 3 weeks to go before I could get back to the States. And I was sitting down by the waterway on the Bosphorus, and so I got on a boat. I was basically just wanting to hide. And it was a beautiful day. So everybody on the boat is up on the top. I went down to the first level below. And I found the place that was so far in the back, it was like in the dark. It was in a corner. And so I sat there and I don't know what I was going to do. I just sat there. I was running away from life. I was hiding and I was convinced I made a mistake. So this old man comes down the stairs at one of the boat stops and he's wearing a black robe, like all the way down to his ankles, and he has like a stovepipe hat on his head. And he's very old, he's weather beaten. And instead of just getting a seat where he came down, he goes all the way across this place to where I'm sitting. And he sits on the same bench that I'm sitting on right next to me. And what started to happen gradually as we started to have a conversation, and we talked for probably an hour, hour and a half, and then it was his time to get off. That whole time that I was having a conversation and we were talking back and forth, I didn't realize that he didn't speak a word of English and I didn't understand in language a single word that he said, but we had this connection. So we got up and he kissed me on the cheek and I watched him walk off the boat. And as I'm watching him walk down this plank, they threw a plank from the boat down to the shore. I knew there was something different. And I walked away from that experience, got off the boat. All of the fear, all of the stuff that had bound me up was totally gone. And it's never come back. And I knew three things. I knew for sure that the universe was watching me, that guy didn't show up by accident. I knew no matter what, I would be safe, no matter where I go in the world. And I knew that I would be guided in terms of what to do. So my experience of travel started with such a negative experience that turned positive, that I always thought that those things that I got were from travel. And so every chance I had for years, I would get on a plane and travel anywhere, because every time I traveled, I felt those same things. I was being guided, I was safe. Everything about travel was like my solution to who I am. I still have that today. And so anyways, I think that my experience started with, I need to get away from home because I can't be myself. And it went to finding something so much bigger that it keeps unwrapping, it keeps getting bigger and deeper every time I travel. But I'm starting to see that I don't need to travel for that. But it took me a long time to figure that out. So I can actually experience being guided in talking with you guys today. Even though you're in Brazil and I'm here in Arizona. What a deal.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
What's your reaction to that, Guilherme?
You still have your turn, yeah? I'm waiting your turn, yeah?
Wait, what was the question?
No, okay.
I will say one small thing, and then yes, I want to hear your reaction to that. Francis, you mentioned this idea of unraveling who you are, right? That the solution to who you are has been found through travel, and I think that's I've traveled all my life, really. We immigrated from Panama to the United States when I was 9 years old. And ever since then, my family has been transferred to different places. So the experience of being in a new place is pretty normal to me. What I think travel has done for me is that it shows me a new part of myself that I never knew I would connect to, right? So one, the ability to learn a new language and experience new way of life or watch different TV shows. Like I wouldn't have known When I was in Panama, we ate a certain diet. Moving to the States, we have a new diet. Like, oh, this is interesting. I don't know. I didn't know that I would have liked or disliked this food. The same goes with music. When I think about how I've learned how much more curious I am than I would have ever thought, because when I travel and I live with these families, I have all sorts of questions. I didn't know how adventurous I was until I started traveling and someone would offer me the experience to do something. And I was like, yeah, sure. That sounds cool. I've never done that before. Right. And so I think I get to meet a different part of Valerie every time I travel. I see it reflected in my choices. I see it reflected in the conversations with other people and the way people interact with me, like what they seek me out for, or how they respond to me changes, depending on where I am. And I've been in many places where I don't speak the language, to your point, Francis, where it's been fantastic. I get an opportunity to see how patient I am in those moments, or how safe I make it for people to practice their language with me, or their English or Spanish with me. So I just get to meet a new part of myself.
Nice. Well, yes. Yeah, I always go back to this experience that you both are sharing, like the experience in the boat in Istanbul, in the Valerie experience, like living in different place, traveling. Yes, there is one thing that I remember. I one time I was working in a bed and breakfast in New Zealand. And they have like nice sayings written on the walls, and like a really nice place. And yeah, just from what you've just shared, like one of the sayings was like we can be a new person in each place. And one thing about traveling, like we can experiment being different people in different places, and that's interesting. But I do have the impression that the experience of fear and the experience of no fear that friends shared, and together with the curiosity that we have when we travel, we find ourselves so curious about life and people, learning, is that I think that's our natural, that's how we natural, like Valerie mentioned, like what we really are. Yeah. I think that's our maybe what we really are, like this
who we really are,
openness without like where the fear comes from ideas, previous experience, and combination of them. And where the no fear of Francis came, I don't know, that's interesting. Maybe it had some relation with the travel experience of being open, of more possibilities, and as Francis said, like a broader, wider world and life, something like this. So yeah, I've been thinking about this, and just curious enough, like as I also have been traveling for way too long now. One of the curious things that I found in this pandemic a couple of years here in Brazil is how interesting it is to try to understand the other mind, the mind of not traveling, the mind of being in one place. And that's also really interesting. That's new for me. That's in some ways, yeah. And really, I'm finding curious to learn the other experience from traveling. That's, yeah.
Could you say more about that? Because I'm on the opposite end. I'm so used to being here that travel is very different. But for you, being home is the part that's different. Could you say more? Fascinated by it.
Well, I think actually we cannot leave behind our previous experience, like traveling one. So I think it's how is to bring our experience, learnings to our daily life in one place. I think that's really interesting. Like how to see again the beginner mind, yeah. Like how we see what's the best way to live our same day life in the same place and doing the same things, if not this fresh mind, this beginner mind. I think that's to combine this both experience sounds like an interesting possibility, like interesting experiment and results maybe. Make sense?
Yeah.
Is that your experiences as well?
That's really fascinating, because I think what you just said, similar to what Francis mentioned. Francis, you mentioned travel on the horizontal versus travel on the vertical. I think, Guilherme, what you just said is really about how do you take the horizontal, which is everything that you're doing every day in the same place at home, right? But give it the experience and the depth and the novelty and the adventure that the vertical travel gives you when you're in a different place. That's kind of what I heard. That's how I interpreted what you said. Like, how do you see your neighbors and the places you go to shop your groceries and the interaction with the people in your home in a new way every time, the same way that you would experience when you're in a new place?
And I brought one side of the experience, which is travel, to home. And the way I did it is I started working when I first was traveling with people who were very ill, psychotic and severely depressed. And I was really trying to understand their world. And I just come back from learning all these things about travel. And what I started thinking is, if I think about these people from what I know about travel, they have their own culture. And they're trying to learn how to live in my culture. But it's so different for them. They're going through culture shock. And so I started describing psychotic adults as going through culture shock, because and it really worked. It made the basis of, I actually built a whole program that still runs that was based on that kind of thinking. But to me, it came from taking travel and putting it into this whole other area that nobody ever thought of joining. Travel and psychosis, you've got to be kidding.
You might, I think this is a good place for the two of you to share what you do. What is the work that you do? Because you've hinted at it, but it may be helpful to just say flat out, what do you do in the world right now?
Francis, I'm going to give a suggestion. Maybe we be rebel and we just keep on not knowing each other what, what we do.
Oh, now you like it. Aha!
Rebel.
I'm enjoying it.
I knew it. I knew it. So you go first.
No,
You
joking.
set me up before.
Live in the mystery, Guilherme. That's fine.
It's nice. No joking. Well, what I'm doing now, I'm going back to my work with traveling, helping people to travel to India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Tibet. That's what I've been doing mostly the last 22 years. And now finishing the pandemic, hopefully so much, be able to do it again. And again, after this 2 years and a half here, I'm really curious to see how it's going to be. I think it's going to be, it's always different, eh? Every time that we go back to one place, travel again. But at this time, I'm really curious to see how it's going to be. So yeah, that's my present work.
So it's India, and which other countries?
The neighboring countries, Nepal,
Okay.
Bhutan, and Tibet in China.
Okay, I got that. Nice. I would take all of them.
Please, please.
But Guilherme, you specifically organize tours and trips there. Is it what do they do when they come with you on these trips?
Okay. Well, the main thing is to prepare them to put a program that is really customized. Like I really can listen what they prefer to do, from the possibilities available, and that's one of the main things. Then to prepare them, because it can be a culture shock, can be like really a not pleasant experience. If you can be like it's very, very often we listen, either you love or you hate India. There is no medium term. Yeah, and it's so true. And for me, in this 20 years, it's so clear that the difference is, did you understand India or we didn't understand India? Yeah, so I see one of my main responsibilities is to help them to understand how to travel there, so that they can enjoy it better, use their time better. And then what they do is depends. There are different regions, sometimes more connected to nature, to walks, mountains, sometimes more connected to studies, yoga, Buddhism, It's a combination. Different people will enjoy. Some people just want to have a contact, try to understand what are those. Whoops.
We lost Francis. All right, we'll continue. We'll catch him up.
Okay. And okay, back.
Here he is. He's back. He's back.
Oh, nice. Okay.
All right.
It's,
You have to unmute
muted.
yourself. You're muted, Francis. We lost you for a second there. It looks like
More
you went
than
on
a second.
a horizontal trip.
Anyways, I'm back. I'm glad to be back. I was ready to get us on my phone.
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay, just finishing. So some people do different. Some people just want to have a initial contact, an idea of what those traditions and things we can learn there. And then some people want to go deeper into that. And I try to understand what they want to do there, see, learn, and then I try to offer the best combination of it to them. Yeah.
Francis has something very similar.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I could talk about mine. Basically, I'm going to continue to do the travel because that's where my heart is. But my heart's in another place too, as I've gotten older. I'm really interested in sharing stuff from a perspective of being a traveler, being a therapist for 35 years, and having an interest in spirituality and transformation. So that really has prepared me to want to work with older people. Because I think that there's so much about being older that really is not, it's not offering us a good package. I look at the things that I hear about older or watch on TV, and in the end, I think the only thing important about being older is, do you have your finances in order? Do you play golf? Are you going to go on cruise ships? And are you going to get your meds at a cheaper price? Oh, and you can call your grandchildren. I mean, it's horrible to me. And I think it's because it's time for those of us who are getting older to totally change the paradigm. So that's a focus that actually Kathie and I are just getting that off the ground. So we're going to be doing our first exploratory group for people who are older to help us to learn how to join together and to come up with something better than what it looks like right now. But travel is also going to be continuing. Like you, I've had to set it aside for the last couple of years, it seems. And my goal in travel probably comes from my experience. I told a little bit about my story of meeting the guy on the ship. My goal when somebody comes with me is that they can go back home being transformed. I want them to literally have such a powerful, profound experience that they're not the same. And then I want to work with them to be able to integrate that more when they have some idea of how to take it further and really integrate it into who they are. So that means I give people frameworks to think, and that'll be different. I help people overcome the fears of travel. I help people look at travel from a perspective of, well, I have a couple of them. One is I think a good traveler starts off being a fool. So I teach them that a lot of other people will approach them. What are you going to Tibet for? That's crazy. There's so many things to see in this country. And it's like, after a while, you hear enough stuff that it's like, makes you feel like a fool. And then you realize that it's true somewhat, that once I get there, I am pretty foolish because I have no idea what I'm going to do. So our goal when we travel is at least 75 to 80% of the time, I recommend that people be lost. Just wander around and be lost and see what comes up. So I have a whole bunch of those things that we work on, but they're all designed to help a person to look at, what am I learning in this experience? What's going on inside of me? Anyways, that's just a short intro. But as soon as I get a chance to put together a trip, I actually am hoping to go back to Italy. I don't know why, it's just been so long.
I like that. Be lost and be a fool when you travel. Guilherme, you might want to share. I'd love to have you share. What is it that took you in this particular path in life? What had you decide that going to India and arranging those types of trips and to Nepal and Bhutan and all that was important to you?
I didn't find it here. I tried to find it here quickly, but I do that later. Joseph Campbell has one. He brings one saying from Jesus in one of his books about being lost. Like I don't remember the exact words, but it's something like when we get lost, it's that we found ourselves. When we think we found ourselves, we are lost, and when we get lost, that's when we find ourselves. That's interesting connection
Thank
to
you.
your
I'm going to see if I can find that, or if you find
ideas.
it for me.
For sure, I will.
like
I will.
it.
And I went because sports, outdoor sports. When I was younger, I used to love to go. I still love to, but was my main thing to go trekking, these kind of things. And Nepal is like a mecca for these sports. So I got invitation to work there, to travel there and work, and to work there as a guy that had to study, to travel, study, and do the course. And when I did the course on Buddhism, I was like, whoa, so good. All those things that I used to think, and way better and way further. I found people who have this thinking as well, common thinking. And then, but it's still, I share with friends that in this first course was like a short course, some days course in a monastery, and I was really happy with the course. But I would look to the mountains, around it, and I was really keen to go to the mountains, ready to go. And then in the end of the course, there were people coming for a longer course, for a 30-day course in the monastery. I was like, what? Oh, look at these mountains. How are we gonna be 30 days here in the monastery? I was happy there, but looking forward so much to go to the mountains. A few years later, there I was really happy doing this course, and yeah, so I still love the outdoor sports, but for sure these studies and the possibilities that it can offer us is I hope growing in my the things that I try to do, understand and live better. Not easy, but it's interesting. Yeah.
That's exciting. And I think, I'm so glad that the two of you have found a way to enrich people's lives, like the day-to-day life, either by looking forward to something or appreciating where they currently are. It sounds like you're both now taking on what you could bring to it. Maybe because of this pandemic, you would do it in a different way than you would have experienced in the past. I know the time has gone by so quickly. I want to start to kind of think about here and now.
I know. You're going to rein us in now.
I want to have you guys reflect a little bit with us. What has it been like, from the outset of this conversation, which I can imagine we could have talked for another 2 hours easy, and you might after this, but from the start of this conversation, or the experience of being invited to now, tell us a little bit about what what do you think so far of having met each other and had this conversation today? Start with you, Francis.
Well, one of the places that felt really like it touched me, because it's an interest that I think has so much potential is, Guilherme, I keep hearing you making references to beginner's mind and to aspects of Buddhism. And then I find out the places that you've been are, such rich resources for Buddhism. So I guess that spiritual aspect, I guess my attraction, and I'm just realizing this right now, my attraction is towards people who can go beyond the physical, vertical travel, go into psychological and all that. But I really like the opportunity to think that those of us who are in this have some sort of spiritual grounding. And I'm always interested in, like, how does Buddhism factor into all these things that we've been talking about? That would be a huge conversation, but it's sort of, to me, very rich thinking about it.
Nice. Well, until we started, this crazy busy life and and then happy I stopped a little bit earlier, like half an hour earlier, kind of stopped as much as I could, and
Sorry.
because my alarm came here. I turned off the notifications, but alarm was stronger.
Mine off.
Sorry.
Okay.
And so I didn't want to go straight from the busy day to our talk, so I stopped a little bit earlier, and I was enjoying thinking what would come ahead, and think about the questions that we didn't ask here, we didn't use here, and which is interesting, nice. And what I'm curious now is how interesting it is. How maybe we all enjoy this kind of conversation. Yeah, that's a common thing among us human beings, that people that we sooner or later we can go to these conversations. We'll find common ground, common interests and answers, and that's so nice. And so I'm thinking about it. No conclusions, just wondering how interesting it is. And I cannot escape to say, when you're saying nicely about these works of ours on changing, somehow changing people's lives, which I think so connects to how we see our life changing, and how we find it interesting, important, and so nice to do together with more people in different ways. I think I know somebody else here in Francis that does this kind of things as well, with people. And I was really curious to listen how you see your work, which I was really amazed when I got some impressions on it from our talk. Really amazed, and how you see the relation between your work and what we've been talking here, Valerie.
Yeah, is this a question?
If it's okay to ask now,
yeah. Was it a question for me? How I see the relationship? Yeah.
Between your amazing work to what we've been talking on traveling and so on.
Yeah, I think I pursue conversations the way you guys pursue travel.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly. It's exactly that for me. The idea of, not planning ahead what's going to happen. It's a comfort zone for me too, I realize, because I have a lot of experience. So I don't have as much trepidation or fear, which makes it a little bit, I think, uncomfortable for my guests that prefer to know in advance, what are we talking about? Who's this person? Right? Kind of like how we shared. You're not the only ones who have shared this with me, but I realize that I like for these conversations to be like taking a trip and getting to see something or hear something or meet someone that you would otherwise never have experienced. Like getting lost. It's actually like getting lost in the conversation. I don't write down any questions specifically beforehand. I have a couple that maybe come out of the conversation that I don't want to lose sight of, but never do I say, these are the 5 questions I'm going to ask. And so that's how I see my work connected to a view, is giving you an experience, opportunity to get lost in conversation. Now, since we do have a destination, unfortunately, we can't stay locked for a long time. You both have brought up some really fascinating perspectives to some of your own challenges, and also how other people might be challenged with either the travel or the lack of travel they're experiencing now. I like to leave my audiences with a challenge or an activity or something to do as a result of listening to this conversation. So I'm curious, if you were to challenge people who've been listening to what the two of you have shared so far, extend an invitation to them or an exercise for them to do or anything like that, what would you challenge them or invite them to do? That's for both of you.
Oh, Francis?
Well, what I just thought of is that there's a writer on the East Coast, and he would bring his grandchildren to the home that they had, like a place on the water for vacation. And there was a mantelpiece over the fireplace. And they had all kinds of knickknacks and everything scattered throughout the house. The grandchildren would gather a bunch of these and just put them up on the fireplace. And what he would then do is he would start with the first one and start telling a story. And then he would bring in the second thing into his story and continue it, and then bring in the third thing and continue it. And then at the very end, complete the story with the last thing on the mantle. So I guess my challenge would be to find how, if we were to think of our life as different aspects, it's like we talked about travel, spirituality, I'm talking about older adulthood, and I put them up on the mantelpiece. I like the idea of thinking about how do these relate to each other if it was all one storyline.
All right, so make sure I understand. So not necessarily taking specific items, but these different elements of living and connecting them to each other. So you mentioned travel, spirituality.
But they're personal to somebody,
Yeah.
Like what's personal to me is what would be on my mantle. But I like the idea of putting them up there and then starting to see how do they relate to each other. Because so many times we look at life from one perspective.
Yeah.
And I think travel automatically opens that up and says, well, don't just look at it this way. It's too narrow. We could do that at home with our imaginary fireplace.
The only thing I want to clarify is so if you had to choose, if you had to give people a little bit more direction, if you had to give them 4 places to look that they would connect together, what 4 places would you tell them?
Okay, so I could start off with, just feeling like a traveler to me is somebody who's willing to act on a whim and look foolish.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one part, the fool. So then maybe next to it might be, I want to change the way that older people look at life. So I would put the older age group next to the fool. And then I have a real interest in how do we move beyond the way that we look at things from greed or money or all those practical, we need those things, but there's deeper reality. So I would put spirituality up. So if I just use those 3, I could start to look at, how could I become more foolish in my spirituality so that as an older person, I'm able, to bring things to life that nobody thought of. And so you just start mixing up things that are important to you.
I like
it's
that.
A way to open up. I never actually did it, and I never thought of it till today. So it's an idea that came out of our our common way of thinking here.
I love that. I love that. The idea of taking different aspects of living and making a story out of it, connecting all together. But I think even more practically, you could do exactly what you described. And if you have a child or a grandchild or a spouse or whatever, they take 4 things that belong to you and put them on a table or put them on the mantle.
Yeah.
And your job is to tell the story of these 4 items, how to connect those.
They find interesting ways to connect them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nice. Okay. Hey, that's a good experiment. Thanks, Francis. Guilherme, what about you? What would you challenge this audience to do or explore?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure I'm happy about the answer I will give. I'll need more time to think about it. But what came to my mind is the challenge that I'm including this challenge to see if we can be as happy as when we were traveling, if we can be as happy as when we were traveling, if we are not traveling, you know, like you know, usually we are really happy about traveling, yeah, and idea to travel in the future when we are traveling, and if we can have that experience without traveling. I think that's a interesting challenge that I give to myself. I try to experiment, play with it, and learn from it, and I think it even helps us to travel better, to use better our time when we are traveling. If we come to the same exercise, you know, I don't know, again,
Yeah.
the child beginner mind, yeah. Child because came the one image that sometimes we read about it, like one example of the exercise that we try to learn there on meditation. So it's like the mind of a child in a museum, you know, when a child is looking at a piece of art, so fresh, so yeah, in that direction. That's what came to my mind. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like what you're also alluding to is this idea of, you know, have you heard of the different layers of, so there's a way of being, right? There are the things that we do in order to get to a certain outcome, and then the things that we have, which is the actual outcome. And you know, how I've been taught is that oftentimes we think that, oh, we'll have an exciting life or a fulfilling life if we get to do all these different things, right? So then we do these different things, and we'll have the opportunity to be a certain type of person as a result of having done all these things. The problem is that the formula is flipped, right? We often approach life like, oh, I want to have this so that I can do that, and then I get to be this kind of person. So flipping it instead, like you said, so what would it look like if you could choose to be, in this case, happy or fulfilled or adventuresome or satisfied or whatever word is? If you could choose to be that way, and you know, what kind of things does an adventurous person do? And then you do those activities. And then as a result of doing the activities, you then have some sort of outcome or result. So that's how I heard your exercise.
Yeah.
Start with what you want to be at the beginning, as opposed to wait for it as a result. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, but I'm also thinking about it.
Yes.
I'm not a good person. Just yeah. There's something about the traveling experience that is nice to think about it, to understand, and how we can use it here. But no fixed answers or
no
ideas. Just yeah.
Well, we didn't get a chance to use all of our wild card questions today, so we'll end. I know, just one. So we won't have time to answer them, but I would like for you to end by sharing. Let's share the questions that you have, and we'll leave them in the ethers for you and others to reflect on. So what's another question that you would have liked to ask today?
Well, I'll go first. Guilherme. Yeah, I have to get it in my head. Basically, I am at the end of this conversation just thinking about how rich it is that travel has given us a way that applies to every part of life. So life is a journey, and everything about living can be seen as travel can be seen as a journey. So I guess where I'm ending up with is appreciating how that metaphor for all of us has so much enriched our life. You cannot talk about my life without talking about travel, but that's true for all of us because it's had so much of an imprint on who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm thinking I want to end, because I feel it strongly.
Love that.
Life is a journey.
Life is a journey. Guilherme, what about you? Either a final thought or a question that you'd like to leave with us?
No, I'm happy. I think the talk went much nicer than the questions I had. I wouldn't bring them. I prefer to stay with the way the talk went. So nice. Thank you so much.
What are you taking from this conversation? Guilherme, yeah.
I think this feeling of amazingness, is that how to say? This amazingness, how how to say, experience among people can quickly go to that direction in the quality that it happened here. So nice. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. I'm so grateful to the two of you for having said yes and not scratching the itch to like try to have a conversation before or research the other person. And the gratitude for Francis, you and I being able to connect by randomly sitting next to each other at an event years ago and maintaining our connection over the past few years with meaningful conversations. And Guilherme, you too, I'm so grateful to Luciano. I don't even know he thought
I was thinking about
that it
him
would go
just now. I was
beyond.
thinking about him just now, yeah.
Yeah, that he would have ever thought, that.
You know that he had a girl?
No, I did not.
Yeah. So nice, yeah. So nice.
Wonderful. But little did he know that introduction via LinkedIn would lead to a wonderful friendship and opportunity to share some profound ideas over this past year. And thankful for the two of you just to be so open and generous in sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. I'm sure the audience appreciated it.
I totally enjoyed it.
Yay, me too.
And
you guys,
I've enjoyed both of you being a part of it. Thank you.
Love
Very nice meeting you, Francis.
And I would just say thank you also for, I don't think I'd ever shared that these conversations for me were like travel. I don't know if I ever made that connection I never articulated it, and the idea of getting lost in conversation and how appealing that is to me. And so thanks for getting lost with me over the
wonderful.
last hour.
Yeah. That's what we talked before the talk. Let's get very lost. That's what we talked.
I just want to thank the audience. If you've been tuning into this conversation, thanks for getting lost in the conversation with us and experiencing this Not Quite Strangers episode. It's always so meaningful and helpful if you give us a like or a favorite in your platform, whatever you're listening or watching this podcast on. And also any comments that you have about what you heard or experiences that you'd like to share with us would be so appreciated. So thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.